Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naistiki Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langati girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna. So we are resuming from third canto, chapter 27, verse 8. Yadracha yadracho palabdena santushto mitabhun muni Vivikta Sharana Shanto Maitra Karunatmaman. For his income, a devotee should be satisfied with what he earns without great difficulty. He should not eat more than what is necessary. He should live in a secluded place and always be thoughtful, peaceful, friendly, compassionate, and self-realized. So these verses are describing the qualities that a jnani should cultivate. Beginning from verse 7, Lord Kapila in 4 verses gives the 18 qualities that a jnani should cultivate. And previous verse, he spoke about the qualities that the person should be samadrishti. He should be equal to every living entity, without enmity or intimate connection. He should practice celibacy. He should be grave, and swadharmena, that he should be exclusively occupied in one's own occupation, or as Srila Prabhupada says, one's own eternal occupation. And finally, baliyasa, which is offering the results of all activities to the Lord. In this verse, Lord Kapila, he talks about the further qualities to be cultivated. So he mentions that the devotee should be satisfied with what comes on its own accord. Yadrashaya uplabdena santushto. So this notion of being satisfied with what comes on its own accord, it has two aspects. One is accepting the predestination or the force of karma. So one understands that what one gets and does not get is based on one's own destiny, and based on that the person has a philosophical understanding of whether not to get too agitated. The other aspect is using one's energies wisely. So Rupa Goswami mentions about prayashchas. One of the things that destroys bhakti is prayashchas, which is over endeavoring for mundane things. So the other understanding is that, which is aligned to the notion of the predestination, is that one only applies enough energy to get by. One does not over endeavor. Atyahara prayashchascha. One does not over endeavor for things that are of no use. These qualities, incidentally, also appear in a conversation between Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami in Madhya Lila 2278. Mahaprabhu talks about the 26 qualities of a for devotees. And these qualities appear over there also. So the second quality is mitabhuk, that eating only as much as needed. Ultimately, it talks to the need to control senses. So Rupa Goswami mentions again this in opposite, Atyahara. One should not eat more than needed because that would be adverse to spiritual practices. And Srila Prabhupada explains this in many ways. If you eat more, you'll become lazy. If you eat more, you'll become greedy. If you eat more, then your health will suffer. If you eat more, then your mentality will become contaminated. You develop the mentality of hoarding or wanting more than what you need, so that mentality will develop. So mitabhuk is more of a manifest symptoms of all this. Then Lord Kapila says one should be a muni. So Srila Prabhupada contextually interprets muni differently. Sometimes he condemns a muni, and this is mostly in the context of a jnani, that he says a muni is one who agitates the mind. So the jnanis, or who are mental speculators, that's what they do. They try to extract different interpretations. They try to interpolate and extrapolate things that are not there. They try to disprove what other munis are thinking. And then, of course, there is a muni who is a devotee, which really talks to the quality of introspection. So, for being thoughtful. That Prabhupada says he should always think of Krishna and how to render service to the personality of Godhead. So contextually, Prabhupada gives different explanations, but here he is interpreting even though Lord Kapila is talking in the context of jnani, Srila Prabhupada is actually transposing it and talking in the context of a devotee. So Prabhupada said the only anxiety of a muni should be, and how better can I serve the devotees and the Lord. So just as a materialist is always agitating the mind to improve his material condition, a devotee is always engaged in thinking how to spread Krishna consciousness, how to improve his own Krishna consciousness. And we see that from Prabhupada's own life, that people who were around him were surprised that anytime he would talk about Krishna consciousness, or about preaching. Vivikta Sharan. So Vivikta Sharan is living in a place of pilgrimage. So a place of pilgrimage is recommended because there is the materialists do not stay there. Now they go there, but at least they don't stay there. They'll go there and they'll take darshan and come back. And even when they are there, they tend to be more spiritually inclined. But for a devotee, choosing to live in a place of pilgrimage is to be able to get the association of other like-minded people, to live in a secluded place, and to be in a holy place. Because a place of pilgrimage is because the Lord performed some pastime, or his devotees performed some pastime. So there is this auspiciousness that is created. So we also know that this is one of the 5 most potent aspects of bhakti given by Rupa Goswami, aspiring to live in a holy place. Then Maitra, friendliness. That devotee should be friendly to everyone, but intimate friendship should only be with other devotees. Then Atmavan means situated in the spiritual position. So Atma can refer to body or the mind, but here the word Atmavan means one who is self-possessed, which means that he understands that he is His self is not the body, but the soul. And then he always remembers that his main concern is to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. So that is Atmavan. Basically, a person who is aspiring to become a spiritualist, whose sense of Atma. So Van means one who possesses. Atmavan is one who recognizes the fact that I am possessing the soul, or the soul is possessing the body. So the focus is more on the spirit than on matter. Okay, verse 9. Sanubandhicha dehasmin. Sorry. Akurvanna sadagraham jnanena drishtatatvena prakriti purushasya cha. One's seeing power should be increased through knowledge of spirit and matter, and one should not unnecessarily identify himself with the body and thus become attached by bodily relationships. So Lord Kapila uses the term asat agraham, which is a translation of aham mameti, me and mine. So the person should be free of this aham mameti, and he should be seeing the truth about Prakriti and Purush. Prabhupada says that the conditioned soul, they are always identifying with mine and myself. And he said this is aham mamata, same thing as aham mamiti, which is the root cause of the conditional life. But when a person begins to see things as a combination of matter and spirit, then he can distinguish that I am spirit, my body is matter. Everything around me is matter. So the aham changes, and so does the mameti. So in verses 6 to 9, Lord Kapila, he has described the preliminary practices that carry the jnani through the door of liberation through Sankhya Yoga. And as I mentioned, that in the purports of this text, Srila Prabhupada, he demonstrates that all these aspects of jnana are also cultivated through sadhana vaidhi bhakti. And by the practice of sadhana vaidhi bhakti, one can actually acquire the same characteristics. For instance, Vivikta Saran, or living in a secluded place, it means that living in isolation, separating oneself. We discussed that. Also means Sharas is also the arrows of Kamadev. So it also means that not involving oneself in conjugal or lusty affairs. And Prabhupada says that when a devotee does devotional service living in a place of pilgrimage, in the association of devotees, all this is automatically attained. The person does not have to aspire to live in a secluded place. For a person who is primarily cultivating jnana, then Vivikta Sharas actually means living in an isolated place. That there is no women around, there is no family around, there is no other distractions around. The person actually lives alone. It's called Gyan Sannyas. And Prabhupada says for devotee not needed. He can stay in a fully crowded place of pilgrimage, completely surrounded by devotees, and he will attain the same results of Vivikta Sharas. Okay, verse 10. Nivritta buddhi avasthano duribhutyana darshanaha uplabhyatmanatmanam chakshushevarkam atmadrak. One should be situated in the transcendental position beyond the stages of material consciousness and should be aloof from all other conceptions of life. Thus, realizing freedom from false ego, one should see his own self just as he sees the sun in the sky. So, what is the purpose of cultivating all those qualities? The qualities are a means to an end, and here Lord Kapila, he is saying that what should this lead to? That one should see oneself, Atmagyan, just as clearly as one sees the sun in the sky. What does one see oneself as? As the soul. One is still not able to see oneself as the eternal servitor of Krishna. But nevertheless, they have entered a state of transcendence that is beyond material consciousness. They see themselves not as the body, but as the soul, and they are free from false ego and any form of illusion. Now, when such jnanis advance further, they will also be able to see the personality of Godhead everywhere and in everything. Now, they may still not be able to see the relationship, but just like the sun illuminates everything, the sun itself, the person can see himself and the surrounding. So that's the nature of Atmagyan. The person first begins to see themselves as spirit, see matter as something that they are not, and then eventually also see the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada says that consciousness, it acts in 3 stages under the material conception of life. So these are awake, sleep, and deep sleep. And to become Krishna conscious, one has to be transcendental to these 3 stages of consciousness. So this is known as, this is a theme that will develop in subsequent verses, and Prabhupada is basically laying the seed over here. So from a more practical perspective, the person becomes Duri Bhutanya Darshana, which means that he sees all objects other than the Lord from far away. So the distinction that is being made over here is that the person does not become blind or becomes desensitized. He's able to see. He's able to see all the material world, but Duri Bhutanya Darshana. And again, Duri Bhutanya does not mean that he's seeing everybody 100 feet away or 1,000 feet away. From far away means that as if he is the observer, including himself, including his own body. And sometimes we have this outer body experience that you're in a situation that may be favorable or unfavorable, and then suddenly you have this sense that you have stepped away from the situation and you're watching yourself and the others around you, and you're watching in a detached, impassionate way. And people may be debating or arguing or fighting or laughing, and you're kind of separated away from it. Even though you're in the middle of it, you're away from it. That the more permanent aspect of it is Duri Bhutanya Darshana. That you're in the world but not of the world. Such a person is described as Atmadrak. So Atmadrak, Atma is self, and knower. He's the knower of the self. And also, he is the knower of Paramatma. And again, Srila Prabhupada says that all this can be realized by bhakti alone. Chakshushe Sha Vakram. As we can see the sun without a doubt, one who is fully developed in Krishna consciousness sees Krishna and his energy. Commenting on this, Vishwanath Chakravarti, he uses an analogy to explain this a little bit more. So he says that, and he gives the analogy of an owl, that an owl cannot see the sun even though it has fully functioning eyes. But other creatures, like the humans, can see the sun. Now, the eyes of an owl are actually more sensitive than that of a human. Yet the owl is unable to see the sun. Similarly, the jnani, by virtue of the knowledge, becomes very sensitized. They can distinguish between matter and spirit. They have a keener sense of perception. But just like an owl, they cannot see the Lord, because their sensitivity, their perception is so much focused to Atmadrak that the eyes of an owl are so much trained to see in the dark, they're not able to see in the light. The jnanis, they train themselves so much to see difference between matter and spirit, they're not able to see the Lord, specifically the relationship with the Lord, because it says that when they see the soul, they can see the super soul. So the perception is there, but there is a lack of the ability to see the relationship. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti says that devotee can do that. He gives the example of a verse in Brahma Samhita, Premanjana Churuti Bhakti Vilochanena, that when the eyes are smeared with love, the devotee can see Krishna. And then 11, 14, 21, Bhakti Aham Ekaya Grahaya, that only my devotees can see me, Krishna says. Or 1855, Bhakti Amam Abhijanati, I'm only known by my devotees. So the point that is being made over here is that it's not the ability to discriminate matter and spirit that can give one access to the Lord. It is only love for the Lord that can give access. So the jnanis can go only so much. Even that is an advanced compared to the materialists. They're advanced because they're materially detached. They have no illusion about material matter. But in the scheme of things, they are doing themselves a disservice because they don't want to, or they are unable to progress beyond that. And so Prabhupada says that when the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceived. The senses become purified. Right. So this is the path of a jnani. Now, a devotee, he takes the next step. He uses these purified senses and serves the Lord and his devotees. So that is what gives them access to the Lord. Prabhupada does not refer to the words directly, but he's referring to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu words, Sarvapadi Vinirmukta, Tatpratvenananda. So when the senses are purified, Sarvapadi Vinirmukta, Upadhis are all the material manifestations, then what the devotee does is that he uses those purified senses to serve the Lord. And that's what distinguishes him from the Jnani. So with this, we have the 18 qualities. I'll quickly go over them. Sarva Bhuta Samatvena, equality to all jivas. Nirvair, without enmity. Aprasanga, without intimate material connections. Brahmacharya, celibacy, and Mauna, grave. Sarva Dharmena Balisya, offering the results of Swadharmena Balisya, offering the results of your own occupational activities to the Lord. So these 6 qualities appear in the 7th verse. Then Yadracha po Baldena Sanushto. Satisfaction with what comes on its own accord. Mitabuk, regulated eating. Muni, thoughtful. Vivikta Sharna, living in a secluded place. Shanto, peaceful. Maitra, friendly. And Karuna, compassionate. These 7 qualities come in the 8th verse. Then, Sanubandhe cha deyasmin akurvan asad agraham. No bodily identification or attraction for bodily relationship. Jnanena drishtatatvena prakrita purushasya cha nivrita buddhi avasthano. Transcending the 3 stages of material consciousness and seeing the reality by the knowledge of spirit and matter. This comes half in verse 9 and half in verse 10. Duri Bhutanya Darshana, being aloof from material conceptions of life, and Atmadrak, being self-realized. This both come in the 10th verse. So these are the 18 qualities that a Jnani is recommended to cultivate on their path to transcendence. Yeah, so I'll do a couple of more verses. 2 more verses I'll do. And 3 verses, 2nd and 3rd, 12 and 13 are together. I'll do 3 more verses, then stop. 12 and 13 are kind of complicated verses. Muktalingam sadabhasam asati pratipadyate sato bandhum asakchakshu sarvanushutam advayam. A liberated soul realizes the absolute personality of Godhead, who is transcendental and who is manifest as a reflection even in the false ego. He is the support of the material cause and he enters into everything. He is the absolute, one without a second, and he is the eyes of the illusory energy. So this verse gives the 5 qualities of the object of knowledge and realization of an Atmadrak. So previous verse talked about the qualities that an Atmadrak cultivates, and this is the result of that. What does he see? So we said that he sees himself, and then he also begins to see the Paramatma. So what are the qualities of the Paramatma that he sees now? So he sees the Paramatma as asati. So asati means that he is permanent in this temporary world. It also means that he is a reflection even in the false ego. So one should not think that the Lord has nothing to do with matter. So there is no Paramatma in our body. He is there. When you say he has nothing to do with matter, it means that he is never contaminated with matter. Because he cannot be, it says the Paramatma is there within each atom. So he cannot be, nobody can be more intimately associated with matter. But he's always independent of the effects of matter. So he recognizes the Lord as asati, that he is shining in this temporary world. as a reflection even in the false ego. Second is that he is the Lord of all the causes, including the cause of Prakriti. Bandhum Sata Prakriti. So Bandhum is sometimes read in this context, it is Lord of Sata, all causes, and also of Prakriti. Then he is the revealer of the effects. So Chakshusha Asat. So Sata Sat, Sat is causes, Asat is effect. So cause and effect. So through the Lord is the cause of all causes, and he is also the revealer of all the effects. So what does that mean? That only by the mercy of the Paramatma or by the potency of the Paramatma can we experience the material elements. It is only because of him that we can smell and see and taste. It is only because of him that we can, our Gyanendriyas and our Karmendriyas can interact with the corresponding Panchabhutas or Tanmatras. Then the fourth is that he pervades everything. Sarva Anushyatam. That he is the cause of all causes. He reveals all the effects, and anything else that is there, he pervades it. And the fifth is Advayam, that he is without a second, which means he is unique. So one should not think that there is Paramatma and Paramatma is sharing responsibilities with somebody else, or Paramatma is in a peer relationship with somebody else. The Jiva is helping the Paramatma and the Paramatma helping the Jiva. That is not true. The Paramatma is unique. In these four things, he is completely unique. He is the only one who has these potencies. So these five descriptive items, they describe the Lord as the object of knowledge. And they're specifically describing the vision of a Jnani seeing the Lord in the material world. Right? That's why these descriptions are there, that he's Bandhum Sata, that he is the cause of all causes. Chakshusha Asat Asat. All this material world is revealed by him. There's no Paramatma in the spiritual world, because the jivas don't need any help over there. They are in their own element, so they can interact with whatever they want. But these are the vision of the Jnani seeing the Lord in the material world. And Prabhupada says that a pure devotee can see the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead everywhere, in everything, whether it is material or not. So even when the Lord is present as a reflection, the devotees can still understand that there is the Supreme Lord who is reflecting himself in the material world. So another way of saying, same thing Prabhupada, another way of saying is that everything that a Jnani is aspiring, a devotee already has that. So in the Prabhupada continues to say that in the Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that the background of the material manifestation is Lord Krishna. Right? He says, Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. Everything is coming from me. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita also, that Krishna is the cause of all causes. So this is Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sarva Karana. Then Prabhupada says, later in the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the Supreme Lord, by his partial or plenary expansion, is present not only within the universe and each and every universe, but in every atom, although he is without a second. So this is Ekopaso Rachetam Jagadanda Koti, Ya Shakti Asti Jagadanda Chayadanta, Andantarasta Parmanu Chaitrastama, Govindamadi Purusham. So, so Srila Prabhupada is saying all these qualities that a Jnani is aspiring, Krishna is giving to his devotee. Bhagavad Gita, he says, Sarvasya Prabhu. The devotee says, okay. Then Brahma Samhita, he says, Sarva Karana Karanam. I am the cause of all causes. That I am present everywhere without a second. Without a second also means that if one says that if the Lord is present everywhere, is it the same Lord or they're different Lords? And it means that this very same Paramatma that is present in my heart is present in the heart of a dog and a dog eater, and is also present in the space between the atoms. Okay. Verses 12, 13. Yatha jalasta abhasa stalstena vridashyate swabhase tatha suryo jalsthena divi stitaha evam trivridahankaro bhutendriya manomayihi swabhase lakshito nena sadabhase na satyadrik. The presence of the Supreme Lord can be realized just as the sun is realized, first as a reflection on the water, and again as a second reflection on the wall of a room. Although the sun itself is situated in the sky. The self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and mind. So, so this is Sankhya. Sankhya tends to be complicated, and Lord Kapila is using Anuman. He's using analogies to to explain more about the qualities of the soul. So in chapter 26, Kapila Muni, he had spoken about the creation of the material world, spoken mostly about Sarga, the primary creation by the Lord. And when one goes through that, then the distinction between the soul and the matter, it is self-evident there, because he draws the parallel lines. Now matter is being created, now spirit is there, and then at some point in Visarga, the soul begins to take matter. So it is there. So in the verse 21, Lord Kapila had said that the mode of goodness, which is the clear, sober understanding, sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudev or consciousness, becomes manifest in Mahatattva. And then in the purport, so this is text 21 of chapter 26. And in the text 22, Prabhupada had said that one can see the reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one can see his own existence as well. But what of a person who has not been able to achieve the soul? What if a person says to Lord Kapila that you have been talking to me about the qualities of the soul and Paramatma, but I'm not even sure that the soul and the Paramatma exists. So first you need to convince me that the soul and the super soul exist. Then I will apply myself to this process of Sankhya. So Lord Kapila says, okay, let me explain it to you through an analogy. What's the analogy he uses here? That there is the sun that is shining in the sky, and then inside a room there is a vessel filled with water, and the sunlight is coming through a skylight in the roof and falling on this water, and then that light is being reflected and it falls on the wall of the house. A person that is sitting in the corner of the house, he sees this reflection of light on the wall. And then he says, where is this reflection of light coming from? The rest of the wall is dark, but I see a spot in the wall that is lit up. Where is this light coming from? So then he traces that light and he says, okay, this light is actually coming from the water. But then he says, how can this light come from water? So he traces the beam of light falling in the water, and then he traces it to the original source, which is the sun. In this analogy, the sun in the sky is the Paramatma. The jiva is compared to the reflection of the sun in the water, and the manifest symptoms of life are compared to the reflection of the light on the wall. So now we can see how this analogy works. That even a person with limited understanding can perceive the manifest symptoms of life. And then he would say, where are these symptoms of life coming from? That would lead him to the understanding that there is a soul. And then he will ask, where is this soul coming from? And that will lead him to the Paramatma. So everyone is seeing the manifest symptoms of life, but not everyone is drawing these conclusions. And this is because of the nature of the wall and the water. So the wall is compared with the threefold covering of the jiva, the body, mind, and senses. Now, in case the wall is heavily corroded, or in case the wall is in a way that even though there is light falling on the wall, the person is not able to see it. So this is the example of a person who is so materially absorbed that even if you point out that look at the spot, he's not able to see the spot, because the threefold covering is very, very prominent. Now, the water is compared to the consciousness of the jiva. Now, this is, interestingly, not the consciousness of the jiva who is observing, but the consciousness of the jiva who is being observed. And the reason that it points to that, because when one sees a person who is spiritually advanced, one is automatically forced to think about the Lord. Just like when this water is clear, then the reflection of the sun in the water is clear, and one says, okay, I see that sun here, where is it coming from? And they look up and say, okay, there's the sun. Similarly, when one is in the association of a devotee, or advanced transcendentalist, then because the consciousness of the person is clear, because the person is so connected to Krishna, then the person observing him is forced to think about Krishna. So this is something that is empirically seen also. So many people have had this experience that when they were around Srila Prabhupada, then Krishna consciousness was very, very easy. Chanting was easy. Thinking about Krishna 24/7 was easy. Because he was that pure stream of water that was perfectly reflecting the personality of Godhead. Now, on the flip side, when you're with somebody whose consciousness is heavily polluted, then difficult to see the light. So Prabhupada says, by the understanding of the pure soul called Satyadrak, one can see everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So such a soul is called Sat Abha Sena. That he is, Abhas means that he is giving the reflection of Sad, which is Lord, because of his purified bhakti. So this inference is now clear, right? You see the symptoms of life and you understand that there is a soul. And one can do that empirically by making this distinction between one who is living and one who is dead. In a living person, the symptoms of life are there. In a dead, there is not. Nothing else changes. The material composition is the same. So one does not have to be spiritually advanced. One can empirically see that spot on the wall. And when one is able to see the presence of the soul, then by observing the activities of a elevated personality, one can see the reflection of the Lord in that soul. And one can understand that this soul is connected to the super soul. So while the inference is simple, it has its own limitation. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that trying to deduce from an inference is like trying to understand a person from his shadow. The shadow may reveal some aspects of the person, whether he's tall or short or fat or thin, but the shadow will not say that this person is fair or dark. What is the color of his eyes? The shadow may also mislead. If the person is bent over, somebody may look at the shadow and say this person has a misshapen body. So Anuman is limited. It will not reveal the nature of the Lord and the soul, but it will reveal their presence. Just like a shadow, when there is a shadow, one can say there is a person. They may not be able to say, or they will not be able to say that this person is smiling, or this person is fair, or this person has hair, or black hair, or white hair, or blonde hair. So they won't be able to say that, but they'll say for sure there is a person. So inference can reveal that. But further details, Anuman fails. Now, interestingly, Vishwanath Chakravarti says is that at this point, one has to take shelter of Pratyaksh. So the point he makes is that even though we receive knowledge from Shabda, our faith grows because of Pratyaksh. There's only so far that Shabda can take us. So this is the experiential aspect of faith. So somebody tells us that when you chant Hare Krishna, then it relieves you of anxiety. So when you start chanting, It's Shabda Praman. That you have faith in the person's word and you take to chanting. But then ultimately, you have to experience what he promised you. That you have to feel relief from anxieties. If not, then you will reject the Shabda. So that is why even Bhakti is called Pratyaksha Avaloma. So it is something that is practically experienced. It is what that grows and that is experienced and grows in faith. So this verse started with a person saying, I do not rest Shabda. So Lord Kapila, he used inference or Anuman. Now a person can say Anuman is good but not good enough. In the next verse, he will talk about Pratyaksh. So let me stop over here. I know it's a little long verse, but let me stop here. Next 3 verses that talk about Pratyaksh together. Okay, so I'll pause here and see if there is any comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It's this is Nandagopal Das. Please accept my humble obeisances. It's very interesting that so far I was talking to the people that Shabda Praman is ultimate, and the Pratyaksha Praman is defective. Anuman Praman is also limited, has limitations. So one should take the Shabda Praman as the ultimate. And now I'm learning that after Shabda Praman comes the Pratyaksha Praman, which is very interesting. So that's very enlightening, actually. Thank you very much, Prabhu, because Krishna does say Pratyaksha Vagamam Susukum Kartam Avyayam. He says that. So yes, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was interesting to me also because while that statement is true, that Shabda is absolute, but for us to grow, then it's like Prabhupada says in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, that you accept Bhagavad Gita theoretically, and then after that, when you practice, then your theoretical faith will become solidified. So that is how Shabda becomes Pratyaksha, and then Pratyaksha grows. So you hear more Shabda, and then that becomes more Pratyaksha. Ultimately, even the ultimate process of going back to Godhead is Pratyaksha. Right? You actually experience the change between material and spiritual conception. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Like in the beginning of introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada also said that in order to understand Bhagavad Gita, you have to take it with an open mind with faith. Like considering Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you will understand. If you come up with like a challenging mind or trying to, then it's like a filter, you won't understand anything.
Right. And that's the that's our shelter of Shabda. Because otherwise, how can we make progress, right? We are in a material situation, and somebody who is coming there to help you says that try this. And then you say, why should I try it? How do I know it will work? And there are people who do that, right? You go preaching to people, and some people they just keep arguing. Rampat Maharaj was saying this once, that rule of thumb is that people who ask too many questions, they won't come back. So you have a program and there are new people, and one person is asking, and then you never see that person again, because it's the different kind of inquisitiveness there. So when one has faith in Shabda, some questions are needed, but one has faith in Shabda, then one begins to practice based on that Shabda. But then part of it is also that practice should deliver what the Shabda promised. Right? Krishna said, Masucha, at some point you should start feeling that lack of fear, that fearlessness. Right? If you don't, then how will your faith in Krishna grow? You may not become completely fearless, but devotees experience this in their life, that as they become more and more absorbed in spirituality, their fear of so many mundane things declines. And that's validation that as Krishna, when Krishna said Masucha, he means that yes, actually our fear will go away.
Thank you, Guru.
You're muted, Prem Kishore Prabhu. Still muted. Can't hear you. I think your mic's messed up, maybe. Okay, maybe you can put it in the chat if you want. The question is, fear is the yardstick. How can devotees have a fearful attitude to go to Goloka? I don't think they have a fearful attitude. I think they have I think they're happy to go to Golok, right? We can't have a positive approach to Golok. We do have a positive approach to Golok. I don't think so. I would think it's positive, right?
Yeah, maybe it's like an attitude of we fear that we will fail. That's what he wants to say most probably. There's a fear that we can fail in this attempt.
It is also that our comfort zone is here in the material world. We got so conditioned, we are unable to think of the space in Goloka and what do you call how it will be in Goloka. It's like when you take the worm out of the stool, it goes back to the stool. So I think that's something that I don't know whether that is what Prem Kishore Prabhu is referring to.
Yeah, I think the point is making the fear of not going. So it's not the fear of going to Golok, but it's the fear of staying back or fear of not going to Golok there. So it's a good question, Prabhu. Sorry it took me a while to understand it. The fear that is the fear that is mentioned over here is a kind of fear that bewilders you. This is what is called as good fear, healthy fear. Prabhupada says you should have a healthy fear of the material condition of life. You should fear Maya Devi. You should fear that I'll take another birth again. Right? But that's not the fear that bewilders you. That's the kind of fear that encourages you to make advancements in your spiritual life. It's like, you say that I have a fear of falling sick, so you eat healthy, you do exercise, right? So that's healthy fear. The kind of fear that it protects you is the fear that bewilders people. The fear that, where will my next meal come from? What can I do to make myself happy? What if I am left alone? What do I do to protect my family? Those are fears that, factually speaking, you can't do anything about, but you're still fearful, so they bewilder you. Those are the kind of fears that are being spoken about. Okay. So let me go to the next 3 verses, which are again kind of complicated. Let's see. Bhuta sukshmendriya mano buddhyadesh vihanidrya nineshvasati yastatra viridro nirankariyah manyamanas tadatmanam anasato nasatvan mrsha naste ahankrane drishta nastuvit ivaturaha evam pratyavamrashyasha atmanam pratipadyate sa ahankarasya dravyasya yovasathanam anugraha. Although a devotee appears to be merged in the 5 material elements, the objects of material elements, the material senses, and material mind and intelligence, he is understood to be awake and to be freed from the false ego. The living entity can vividly feel his existence as the seer. But because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely takes himself to be lost, like a man who has lost his fortune and feels distressed, thinking himself to be lost. When by mature understanding, one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. So in these 3 verses, 14 to 16, Lord Kapila, he is trying to explain or prove the presence of soul through pratyaksha, through empirical observation. So he's describing the soul without any material coverings. So earlier on, he was talking about the realization of an atmadrak, of a self-realized soul, and the realization are in the context of the nature of the universe. Now he is talking about the relationship of the soul with the material body. So in the previous 2 verses, it was said that the sun is perceived by the eye, or the Paramatma is realized by the Atma, who is endowed with some bhakti. But in order to be convinced, one may say that show me the soul separately from false ego. So the person might say, I can see the other person's eyes and ears clearly. Show me the soul in the same way. Don't play these Anuman games with me, but show me the soul. The answer to that question is given in these 3 verses, which is Pratyaksh Praman based on Shabda Praman. So how can one empirically see the presence of the soul? So first, Lord Kapila says that because the living entity survives deep sleep, and also the universal devastation one can understand that the jiva is distinct and not dependent on matter. So during the time of the universal devastation, the material coverings are temporarily destroyed. So that's why this is pratyaksh based on shabda. Now, one might say, I haven't seen material destruction. So that Lord Kapila says that accept that there is a material destruction. During the material destruction, the coverings are temporarily destroyed, which means that they no longer influence the soul. Yet the soul continues to exist. And when the soul comes again in the material world, then the material coverings come back again. So a person might say, but I don't believe this whole thing about universal destruction. So then how about empirically seeing a person in deep sleep? When a person is in deep sleep, then his whole entire body is quiesced. Yet the soul survives. If the soul was only dependent on the material body, then every time a person sleeps, he should get up a different person. Because his body had a certain composition, he went to sleep, and because at the time of the sleep, the whole body was different, the senses were not acting, the mind was not acting, the person has no false ego at the time, intelligence is not acting. So everything that you consider to be a symptom of life was quiesced at the time. But yet when the person gets up, he's the same person. He remembers everything. He has the same personality. He has the same propensities to interact with other things. So just by seeing deep sleep, you can understand that the body is separate from the soul. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says in 3 situations, the jiva remains alert despite the loss of the gross and subtle body. The first is when the person becomes liberated. Then the gross and subtle coverings are removed. If the soul was dependent on the gross and subtle coverings, there would be no notion of liberation. Now, of course, this is the Shunyavadi that says that they get destroyed, but he is not subscribing to that philosophy. He's saying that the reason that everybody aspires to get liberated is that there is something that is in existence when the gross and subtle coverings are removed. So this situation of nirahankarika indicates the presence of a soul. Second is, as we discussed, at the time of universal destruction. So when the universe is destroyed, then the soul loses both the gross body and the subtle body. The gross body loses in the universe itself. When the universe is destroyed, there is fire, there is devastation, and the gross body is burnt away. The subtle body remains, but the subtle body is also destroyed when the jiva enters back into the body of Mahavishnu. So at that time, the jiva says, I'm dead. But then he thinks that if I am saying that I am dead, then who is that person who is saying that I am dead? So which means that I am actually not dead. Which means that I have an existence that is independent of the gross and subtle coverings. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that we may not remember it, but we definitely went through that realization. So we have gone through so many devastations, and every time there is a devastation, then the soul goes through this through this thought process. That I've lost my gross body. Actually, he says that the soul becomes very despondent. He doesn't say, Lord Kapila says that the soul becomes very despondent. Just like a rich person becomes despondent on losing his wealth, because the soul is very attached to the gross and subtle body. Now, generally we say that it's the subtle body that has the mind, intelligence, and false ego that is bewildering the soul. But this is a good example to understand that the subtle body is not bewildering the soul, but the bewildered soul takes the subtle body in order to act out its bewilderment. So even when the soul is without the subtle body, because it is inimical to Krishna, it has no desire to go back into the spiritual world. In fact, its desire is, when can I get another subtle body? When can I get another gross body so that I can enjoy? So in this three ways, by the manifestation of deep sleep, the destruction of the universe, and through the practice of bhakti, one can empirically understand. Now he's saying this is pratyaksh praman, empirical in slightly different context. Deep sleep is empirical, we can observe it. Bhakti is empirical by observing those who practice devotional service. That when one is practicing devotional service, then one is aspiring to rid themselves of the material and spiritual and the subtle covering, with the understanding that there is a soul. And the third is, if one accepts the notion of the creation and the dissolution of the material universe, then empirically one would have observed that at the time of the universal destruction, the jiva survives the destruction of the gross and the subtle body. So one may question that if all these realizations are happening, why are they not carried over? That if the jiva at the time of the material destruction is thinking that I'm not the gross and subtle body, why doesn't that thought remain? Or the same thing during deep sleep. So the answer that is given by the acharyas is that when there is a reappearance of the awareness, then the jiva immediately takes shelter of the ahankar, the body, the senses and mind, and begins to enjoy the sense objects. So just like when a person is awake, he either does not recollect the dreams or he does not give much importance to the dreams. So in deep sleep, a person may have, and this is a little bit of mixing analogies, but in deep sleep, a person may have many dreams. Some of them they remember, some of them they don't. But in either case, they will not give much credence to it. Why? Because when the person is awake, then he gets busy. He's busy in his awake activities. Similarly, all these impressions are there. The jiva does realize. Later on, we'll see that even in the womb, the jiva has realizations. So the jiva has all these realizations of its spiritual and identity separate from matter, gross and subtle, but they are overpowered by the enjoying propensity of the soul. It's like sometimes a child falls and the child is crying, and the child is like angry and crying, and then the mother, to distract the child, then he says, look at this toy, look at the way that this toy moves. And the child initially is looking at the toy and crying, and then he gets absorbed in the toy, and he forgets about the pain, he forgets about falling down. Everything is there, but now he's busy with the toy. Same thing happens to the conditioned jiva. Why does it happen? So it happens because it happens because it is the nature of the soul to enjoy. That is the primeval nature of the soul, and it is actually the anugraha. It is by the mercy of the Lord that the soul has acquired this nature to enjoy. Unfortunately, when the soul is conditioned, then it enjoys in matter, so it becomes preoccupied over there. One may make this question that um, what makes the soul so absorbed in the material world? Because the soul is looking for enjoyment. Just like a child, it's the nature of the child to play. So when a child is hurt, the mother is not going to give it food, the mother is not going to give it a bath, because the child does not like all that. It'll get even more upset. But the child's nature is to play. As soon as he gets a toy, he plays. The soul's nature is to enjoy. So when it gets this paraphernalia, the body, the senses, the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, it gets quickly absorbed in it. All those impressions are there. As one makes spiritual advancement, each of these impressions, they become stronger and stronger. That is the reason that people take to spirituality. You see that some people have a strong innate desire. They are of course continuing from previous birth, but there is intrinsic desire. All these impressions are stored, not in the subtle body, but they are with the soul. The soul remembers that I remember that when I was within the body of Mahavishnu, or when I was in the womb of my mother, this is what I was thinking. But that those remembrances are they're like the sun behind the cloud. That it is there, but it is hidden. Okay, so we will now do verse 17. Devahuti ruvacha purusham prakriti brahman na vimunchati karhichet anyo na pasarayatvaksha nityadva anayoha prabhu. Sri Devahuti inquired, my dear Brahman, does material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? Since one is attached to the other eternally, how is this separation possible? So in 4 verses, Devahuti is going to be talking about the possibility of liberation, or the rarity of liberation. So while Lord Kapila has been talking about how the Jnani cultivates the knowledge to be free of matter, Devahuti has been noticing the intimate connection between matter and soul. When he said that the reflection on the wall, Devahuti was thinking about how typically that wall is completely corroded by the 3 modes of material nature. When he was talking about the source of water, she was talking about the rarity of having an association with one who's connected with the Lord. And when he was talking about how through pratyaksh and through anuman, one can perceive the soul and the super soul, she was actually thinking about how everything around the jiva is actually conspiring to make this difficult, to draw these inferences, to observe that the soul is separate from the body. That's the beginning of the journey. Even if one begins the journey, then completing the journey is even still more difficult, because of the same reason that the material nature, it has a very tenacious grip on the soul. So in 17, 18, and 19, he will ask this question that how is liberation even possible? Because the jiva is with Prakriti, and jiva is attracted to Prakriti, and Prakriti is attracted to jiva. So the two things are so strongly attracted to each other eternally. How can this be broken? And then in the verse 20th, she says that even if it is broken, what is the guarantee that this material, and here she says fear, the material fear does not go away. Which means that even if one is able to extricate themselves, somehow, what is the guarantee that they will not once again be attracted to matter? So Prabhupada says that even though one may understand that spirit, soul, and matter are different, their actual separation is not possible, either by philosophical speculation or by proper understanding. So Prabhupada is basically talking about the limitation of jnana. Philosophical speculation and proper understanding is jnana. So later he says that this question by Devahuti of Kapila Dev is more or less impelled by the philosophy of Vaidism. The Vaidists say that consciousness is a product of a combination of matter, and that as soon as consciousness is gone, the material combination dissolves, and therefore there is ultimately nothing but voidness. This absence of consciousness is called nirvana in Mayavad philosophy. So this also addresses those class of philosophers who say that how can you separate consciousness from matter if consciousness is a product of matter? So Devahuti is describing this nature of attraction. She says it is anyonya apashratvat, that this is mutual attraction. Now, if one was attracted and the other was neutral or not attracted, there is some hope. But they say like that if there is a boy and a girl, the boy is attracted to the girl and the girl is attracted to the boy, then nothing much can be done. So if the jiva is attracted to Prakriti and Prakriti is eager to give shelter to jiva, then this is a mutually bonding situation. Vishwanath Chakravarti, he gives a slightly different aspect to this verse. Prabhupada translates Purusham to refer to jiva, saying that the material nature does not give up jiva. And Vishwanath Chakravarti translates Purusham to refer to the Lord, that the material nature never gives up the Lord. So he conveys, Chakravarti Pad, he conveys that because the Lord is eternal and Prakriti takes shelter of him, so she is also eternal as his energy. So the question that Devahuti is asking is that since the Lord is eternal, since Prakriti is his energy, and Prakriti is eternal, the Jiva is eternal, and doesn't it mean that the control of Prakriti on the Jiva is also eternal? So same point, slightly different understandings. So in either case, Devahuti is making that point that by Gyan and Vairagya, and even by Bhakti, how can the Jiva become liberated from this strong mutual eternal attraction to material nature? And she will next explain this by an analogy, which is a short verse. I'll do that and then we can pause for discussion. Verse 18. Yatha gandha se bhumescha na bhavo yatriktaha apamrasya cha yatha tatha buddhe parasya cha. as there is no separate existence of the earth and its aroma, or of water and its taste, there can be no separate existence of intelligence and consciousness. So devotee is making this thing that how the tanmatras and the bhutas are intrinsic, that the quality of earth is aroma. So wherever there is earth, aroma will exist. And the quality of water is taste. So wherever there is water, there is taste. Similarly, wherever there is the Lord, his external energy must exist. He is the Shaktiman, she is the Shakti. And he is eternal, she is eternal, and they are both intrinsically related. Just like whenever there is earth, there is aroma. She is saying whenever there is Lord, there is Prakriti. So how can the jiva escape Prakriti? Okay, so I'll pause over here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. 1 second. Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Could you hear me now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So, sorry, Prabhu, earlier my mic was not there. I called from phone now. Just to clarify that question, and actually, and also I have possibly I don't think it is a multi, probably it is a single question. Maybe I have in different variations. Okay. The first thing is, you said the jiva, once he leaves his body, as towards its attraction, it may not, if probably it has its attraction and it will be again attracted to some kind of a material world. So we do also hear that at the time of death, whatever is the consciousness it carries, it will attain the next place. Like, if we can first talk on that, I have the similar variations probably. Why do we say that point then, like at the time of death? Because even though let us say I'm completely detached. Let us say I feel that I'm completely detached to this material world. But again, when I die, is there any subtle way where it is again attached to the material world? I'll come in, or I will be completely cut off of this and I'll reach.
That's what the yogis aspire to do. That they try to attain this state of detachment, so that when they die, because they're not attached to anything in the material world, they're not forced to take a birth again. So now, because they're not attached to anything, so they don't get anything, in the sense that they go to the impersonal liberation. But yes, antakali cha mameva muktas kalevaram. So the consciousness at the time of death is basically a manifestation of the desire of the soul. Like, it is said that one gets a body based on what you desire and what you deserve. So somebody might desire a certain kind of body, and if they deserve it, they will get it. But the consciousness essentially is a manifestation of the desire. Many times people try to say that you can artificially impose a consciousness or something like that, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't work like that. Your entire life, you have developed a certain consciousness, and that is what will manifest at the time of death.
Okay, so is my understanding correct then? The summary of whole of your life will be at the time of your death, and yeah, okay.
Yeah. As I was, well, this was in the Bhakti Shastri when I was doing chapter 8. Then yes, it is the one of the examples that is given is that throughout your life, you have a calculator, you're punching in numbers 5 plus 7 minus 2 plus 3. When you die, you press the is equal to sign. And that's what the consciousness is. So
Thank you, Prabhu.
things that we are doing, things that we are meditating on, good and bad, they are basically all feeding into what our consciousness will be at the time of our death.
Okay. Maybe again, probably this I may take it later with more clarifications. But to the point earlier one, Prabhu, I did get your view, but still I'm not convinced. Maybe the fear factor, right? Like you know my nature. I'm not kind of a guy who I kind of go through like a negative side of it. Oh, I'm very low and I'm very fallen and I cannot go back to God. I'm not that guy. So is that the quality of a devotee to feel that I'm fallen, I cannot go? Because in my view, that will hinder him to go into next stages. I don't know if it is a fear. It's not a fear factor. It is like a underestimating oneself and not going in it. Is it like a positive approach?
I guess your question is that what really is humility? Like what you're describing is considered as humility. And yes, you're right. Humility is not considering less of yourself, but it is just Hridayanand Maharaj gives this. I often quote this in this respect. Hridayanand Maharaj gave this interesting understanding of humility. That humility is not thinking of yourself as less. It is thinking less of yourself. So even if a person is constantly preoccupied and thinking, I am low, I am this, I am this, what is he thinking of? He's thinking of himself. Like the disciple went to Prabhupada and said, I'm the most fallen. Prabhupada said, you're not the most fallen anything.
Yeah.
Right? He said, you're not the most anything. So, just thinking that I'm the most fallen, that is a very, very advanced state if somebody genuinely thinks that. Otherwise, it's just another form of narcissism. Right? Just saying that I'm this, I'm that. So what is the center of all that? I. Right? So it's not you think yourself as less, but you actually don't think of yourself as that much. You think more, what is it that I can do to serve devotees? There's Krishna. So your thinking is more towards the Lord and his devotees, not so much preoccupied with
myself.
I, me, my. That's in the short time we have. That is the understanding of humility.
That's a very good view. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a question from Prema Manjari that you mentioned that consciousness is product of matter, which is material, but Bhagavad Gita says that soul is conscious and consciousness. My question is that is conscious and consciousness material? Is it not intrinsic to the soul? If it is material, then what the soul consists of? So I actually agree with you. I'm not sure at what point I said that consciousness is material. In fact, the opposite. The fact that consciousness remains despite all material changes, it gives the understanding that consciousness is not material. Right? The three states that were mentioned: deep sleep, or material destruction of the universe, or liberation of the soul. Even though in one case the matter is temporarily destroyed, in the other case it is, for a devotee, it is fully destroyed. During material destruction, it is fully destroyed but comes back again. In all three cases, the consciousness persists. It remains. So the point that is made is the point you're making, that it's that it shows that consciousness is a symptom of the soul and not of anything else.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, quick question about when we say that when we go in a deep sleep, our subtle body is with us, okay? Then we forget everything, and when we wake up in the morning, we remember everything. Because our false ego intelligence is with us in the subtle body, we have everything again. But then, in the time of total annihilation, when we go back into the body of Mahavishnu, do we lose our subtle body?
We do.
If yes, then where this false ego and our karma, where does it reside?
Well, false ego gets destroyed, but karma, Lord Vishnu, he keeps track of it. Because you remember that when the creation happens, then one of the things that is injected into the pradhan is karma. So it's not karma as a notion, it is actual karma. The individual karma of each of the souls that Lord Vishnu is holding on, he injects it, and each of the jiva, then they claim their respective karmas. This is my karma, or maybe they don't claim, it gets allocated to them, but that's what happens, that the karma is given back, and when the soul becomes embodied, then they take their karma, put it in the subtle body, take on the gross body, and then everything continues based on the previous lives of karma.
Okay.
So the what part is relatively simple, the how part is difficult. How does Lord Vishnu do all that? How does he keep track of everybody's karma?
Where the processor is, and the computer, the memory.
Massive computer, yeah. Does he make a mistake? Does somebody get somebody else's karma? So that part is a little difficult to understand, but yes, he does keep track of everybody's karma. The soul keeps track of its desires. That's why the soul, it again gets a material body, even though the subtle body is gone. But so in this connection, the point is made that if today our gross and subtle bodies are taken away from us and we are taken back to the spiritual world, we will be most miserable. Because the subtle body is not there. Subtle body is not making us miserable. We are taking on the subtle body to become miserable. That's the nature of the soul in this conditioned state. So when it goes back to, if it were to go back to the spiritual world, it will basically be in turmoil. It'll say, why is everybody worshipping Krishna? What about me? How come they're not worshipping me? Why do I have to serve the devotees? Dasano dasano das. At least let me become a direct associate of Krishna, or let me become Krishna, right? So the subtle body is not the one that is trapping the jiva. The jiva, in order to get trapped into the material world, is taking the subtle body.
Is a desire.
Correct. Because of his desires. That is why it said the jiva is very powerful. Because by its power, it is creating this material world. By the power it is coming all the way from the spiritual world to the material world. By its power, it is spending countless lifetimes in the material world. Can you imagine the power of the soul?
Incredible.
It has incredible power there.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhescha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Srila Prabhupada ki Hi Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Premanjali Mataji.